Welcome, everyone, and greetings, Mr. Nekhaila. Welcome to Daily Clout. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Naomi. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. So Stephen Nekhaila is a Libertarian Party activist and entrepreneur, renowned for his contributions both in politics and business. He's currently a chair of the Libertarian National Committee. He previously served as an at-large representative and chair of the Libertarian Party of Florida. And wow, let's see. You're a lifelong resident of the Florida Keys. Your roots run deep in the community. And you've been in the hospitality and restaurant industry, Wendy's franchises, Dairy Queen, Island Grill. My goodness. You collectively employ over 250 people. In Key West, you're affectionately known as the Wendy's guy. That's cool. And during a meeting on February 2nd, 2025, Nekhaila was elected chair of the Libertarian National Committee. And here we are. So I'm, dying to know all about why you're doing this with your life. You could just relax in the sunshine and enjoy your successful entrepreneurship. Tell me about what being a libertarian means to you, and then tell me about the status of the Libertarian National Committee, what its goals are, and so on, please.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that introduction. I certainly got a lot on my plate, but I guess as they say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. So my day job, I run businesses. I'm an entrepreneur, and I think that makes me somewhat uniquely in a really good position to step up as chair of the Libertarian National Committee. I've been on the board for 9 years. I've been involved in libertarian internal politics since 2014. So I've been around the block for a while. And to me, libertarianism is all about the simple concept of good ideas don't require force. And that government is, if it's righteous and just, is designed for the purposes of protecting life, liberty, and property. And when you apply that to policy, then you can find a libertarian answer to each policy. So in essence, libertarians believe in personal sovereignty, personal responsibility, believes that government should be a protector if it's fit to govern, and not the big government apparatus that we have now that is a sort of a whirlwind of regulatory capture that benefits many different corporations, and this body that takes tax dollars and makes inflation and prints money and sends it all around the world. And most of the problems we have with government today, I think libertarianism is not necessarily a panacea, but the closest, best answer we have to many of the problems of an overarching government, whether it's at the federal, state, or local level. And so my goal as chairman, of course, as a member of the board, is to grow the party, grow our membership base, grow our fundraising base, bring people in and show people that, hey, if you agree with us on 70-80% of issues, dip your toes in the water and try the Libertarian Party, check out our platform, and come to meetings and participate and see if this is something for you, because many people out there are politically homeless. They don't agree with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, because let's face it, those parties were allegedly based on certain isms, whether it's liberalism or conservatism. I think both have strayed very far from any ideological roots they may have had. Whereas libertarianism is an ideology. We are an ideological ism, and we have certain principles that unite us and keep us on track. So we are working towards being involved locally at the local level, running candidates. Libertarianism isn't just theory, and we want to put it into practice. That's the point of the Libertarian Party. We're working on a big initiative called Project Decentralized Revolution to get libertarians elected to local office, whether it's city council, county council, sheriff's office, etc., because we believe that being as close to the people as possible at the local level is the best bang for your buck way to make us freer in our day-to-day. It's the best way to protect civil liberties and rights at the local level, where it matters most, where it's most applicable, and where you can have the biggest impact on your own life, is to to get involved locally. So that's kind of the little bit of the lay of the land on where we're going, and sort of some of the background on the philosophy. But I can certainly talk more about either.
Thank you so much. Well, that's a fantastic introduction. I guess, forgive my ignorance, but I've been fascinated with
Mhm.
libertarianism since I was first introduced to it, actually by Lee Rockwell at a very
Mhm.
early stage in my career. And I was a pure liberal, but when I heard him describing the libertarian philosophy, it just seemed like, I don't know, intoxicating. I mean, kind of almost too good to be true, right? Because if people could behave that well and leave each other alone, they would have, when things. But let me go right to, given, as I understand it, libertarianism is really about you do your thing, I'll do my thing, less government, fewer regulations, uh, no, not dictating what other people should, how they should vote, how they should pray, how they should, what food they should eat, what private behavior they should have. Given all of that, how do you have a platform?
Mhm.
Like, aren't you supposed to not have a platform except everyone do their own thing? And then my next
Mhm.
question is, how does libertarian differ in that case from anarchism?
Um, no,
This
absolutely, it's a good
is-
question.
Mhm.
It's the question being, is libertarianism just a deductive sort of philosophy where it's basically saying, you know, do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else, or is it more of a philosophy of, well, we have a platform. These are the things we want to see. And I would say it's a mix of both in some ways, but there's an ideal sort of hope for society at the end of the tunnel, which is of course not everybody is a perfect angelic human being, and there needs to be safeguards in place. And we do believe that at the end of the day there should be law and order for it to exist must be just. And so
Right.
we believe that the smallest minority is the individual. So
Mhm.
no matter what your race, color, or creed is. I actually just had an article I put out the other day. My great grandfather, Shitoka James Haramatsu, he was in Japanese internment camps during World War II.
Sorry.
And it's a really interesting story. I had to dig up some family history on that. Um, but that is an area where libertarians believe it doesn't matter, who you are, what you are. The right of the individual is elevated above the collective, above the whole. So in collectivist societies, they believe the group is more important. We believe the individual is more important. So that's sort of the general framework of the philosophy behind, the Bill of Rights. But in terms of what we believe, we do believe in you know for instance, we believe that people, well, let's take foreign policy, for instance. We believe in a non-interventionist foreign policy,
Mm,
meaning that we shouldn't be sending weapons and supplies all around the world to foreign governments, because what happens is that they'll use those weapons, and the people that are at the other end of those weapons blame us. It makes the world less safe, makes us less safe. For example, you look at the CIA funding Al Qaeda in the 80s to fight the Soviets, or funding the Al Nusra Front against the Libyan government, which eventually helped create ISIS. So there's all these unintended consequences that we look at government and say, the government is doing these things, we need to roll it back. So as a part of our platform, we believe that by applying libertarian philosophy to these areas, there are actionable policies that we want to put forward that we believe will make the world a better place.
mm,
Another example would be the regulatory capture of the pharmaceutical industry. Currently, if you're injured by one of their products, they have a great deal of immunity. So there's no justice system for people that are harmed by, let's say, bad pharmaceuticals. And not to
right.
say we're against pharmaceuticals or we're against that industry. It's an important industry. But when we start mixing government with corporations, or we start, we see what's going on behind the curtain, whether it's monetary policy, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's many of our domestic policies, there's a libertarian answer
Right.
to these things. And so putting that into practice through our platform and through our candidates, we can start to deconstruct and say, okay, how do we solve the problem with inflation, for instance?
Right.
Well, it's a matter of, quite frankly, it's a big task, and the libertarian philosophy is closely married to Austrian economics. Not all libertarians are Austrians, but most Austrians are libertarians. And the Austrian economic approach, for instance, would be a policy that many of our members subscribe to, in ways to rework our monetary system. So kind of, giving you sort of a lay of the land view of, where libertarianism applies in the real world. But certainly libertarian policy and practice is something very tangible.
Mhm.
And I think we've seen a lot of politicians lately in the last maybe 4 to 6 years start to try to attract our members and try to say, well, I'm a libertarian and I believe in this policy.
Interesting.
And they're getting those policies from the libertarian world because, of course, they're trying to attract our voter bloc. We make up a small but substantial voter bloc, enough to swing an election.
Hey, everyone. Naomi Wolf here. How are you doing with your New Year's resolutions? January is here. My start was pretty easy. My resolution was to focus on my well-being, and we all know that the foundation of well-being is a good night's sleep. So if I could do just one thing to improve my sleep and overall well-being, it is taking the number one mineral for sleep, which also helps me personally on so many levels. Yes, I am talking about magnesium. Actually, I am talking about the Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. It's 7 different forms of magnesium in this supplement, which are involved in over 600 different biochemical reactions in the body. Pretty much every function in your body is upgraded when you do take magnesium, from the quality of your sleep for your brain function, metabolism, to your stress levels. And even if your 2025 resolution is not to focus on your health, as mine is, how are you really going to be able to achieve all your goals without quality sleep and stress management support? It's hard to do that. So please do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so you can get the vitality that you need to conquer your dreams. Go to byoptimizers.com/Daily Clout now and enter promo code Daily Clout to get 10% off of any order. And if you subscribe, not only will you get amazing discounts and free gifts, you will make sure that your monthly supply is guaranteed. Again, that's byoptimizers.com/Daily Clout, promo code Daily Clout. Take care.
Certainly.
Wow.
We got
What
four and a
would you say your numbers are?
Sure, yeah, 4.5% of the vote in 2016.
Wow, that
So
is significant. Yeah.
in some states, so around 4.5% roughly. So, third parties are making up a substantial voting bloc.
Mhm.
And so the Republicans, Democrats are looking at that and saying, well, we need to win these people over. Maybe we can start adopting some of their policies. And to us, that is also, a win if we can get some of our policies put forward. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's it's a very thoughtful answer. I, devil's advocate, right? World War II. I mean, would a libertarian position be, it doesn't affect us. It doesn't matter that all those Jews are being put in concentration camps. It doesn't matter that Poland's been occupied illegally by the Nazis. It's not our issue. Let's just tend to our own borders and our own people and leave it alone.
Sure, that's a good question. I think that was probably also a question of the American elite at the time, because there was some interest to get involved in World War II, and of course Pearl Harbor happened, and it became official. There was a declaration of war by Congress, and the United States officially entered the war. Up till then, we had the Lend-Lease programs, and we were essentially arming the Allies during that time. And I would say, if we look at foreign policy, post World War II, we could say, well, did we need to get involved in Vietnam, or did we need to get involved in the Gulf Wars, or did we need to get involved in, XYZ conflict? And I think from a purely libertarian, foreign policy standpoint, the answer is no. I think we've probably done less good in the world then we have done bad. And I think we've made the United States, unfortunately, a more targeted place due to our involvement in these foreign conflicts.
But just, I mean, just to press a little
Sure,
bit, because
sure.
often World War II is held up as the example of the good war or the moral war. Would you really have sat out World War II, no matter what happened to Europe and our allies? Or how do you have allies around the world, with a pure libertarian point of view?
Certainly, certainly. That's a good question. I think one of the libertarian answers, quite frankly, is, and World War II is an interesting one because it did change the whole fate of the world. I mean, we still live in this sort of world order that was built on the Bretton Woods post World War II, world. I think World War II was a just war. I think, personally speaking, other libertarians may or may not agree. I think the U.S. getting involved because of what happened with Pearl Harbor, because essentially, I think maybe perhaps it was inevitable that we would get involved. So in the case of World War II, I think we could make an argument that with the Congressional Declaration of War, which is the last time Congress has actually declared war, we could get justly involved with such a fight.
Right.
As terrible as it was for the world, it's something that perhaps needed to be done. And libertarians aren't necessarily pacifists in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at certain conflicts, like for instance, Ukraine, there's many Foreign Legion fighters that are Americans or Westerners that are participating in that conflict that may feel it is their prerogative to fight. But
Right.
I think what's very important to remember with these conflicts is we have to remember, what is the mission?
Right. Right.
Because yeah, because I think unfortunately with our foreign policy, we start to it seems that we've lost sight of, okay, what is the actual mission?
Yeah,
The
that's
United
fair.
States went into Iraq with the hopes of, essentially finding weapons of mass destruction under Saddam Hussein that weren't there, right? So then we went to Afghanistan, and and this was all tied to 9/11, and it ended up being a project that was funded in part by the Saudi regime, and there was many countries involved, and so it was a complicated web. And so at some point, I think, and quite frankly, many members of the military end up joining the Libertarian Party because of their
Interesting.
service. And
Whoa.
I know a lot of guys that say, look, I was over there, we did our thing, and I came home and I'm, looked at what did I spend the last 10 years of my life doing, and what was the mission?
Right.
What was the result? How did that make America a safer place? How did that impact freedom? And so these folks started asking these questions, these veterans, and they say, well, you know what? I'm joining the Libertarian Party because this is what I actually want to be fighting for,
Right. Right.
um, real freedom.
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of our true liberties are being taken not by some foreign adversary, but by our own politicians, by our own federal agencies.
Mm.
That's the greatest threat to personal liberty and freedom, in my opinion, is domestically, not foreign. And
That's
so,
so, yeah. Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry to
that's
interrupt,
fine.
Mr.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, well, that's really interesting, and that makes sense. Well, let me ask you about
Mhm.
domestic policy then. Would a libertarian position on, I mean, here's where I founder, okay, when I debate or discuss with friends of mine who are true libertarians. I my doctoral thesis was in 19th century fiction, British fiction, and the 19th century world was really a libertarian world in Britain in many ways, in the sense that there was no social security. There, you could put children to work if you wanted to. There weren't any weekends that like you could, there were no, you could sell flour adulterated with maggots and sawdust, like I'm not trying to
Right.
caricature libertarianism, but the over extreme of hyper regulation really didn't exist. So what would you do with poor people or old people from a libertarian point of view? Back to the workhouse, back to people dying in the street, living on pennies thrown by people from the goodness of their hearts, no more social security, no more welfare. I mean, what's a libertarian domestic policy when it comes to, say, poverty and retirement?
Absolutely. That's a great question. There is definitely a great many caricature of libertarians as far as should we be getting the children back into the mines, and all that kind of stuff. And I would say libertarianism doesn't abhor social progress. We absolutely believe that, we want to make the world a better place. The end result is a world with more prosperity, more money, more advancement, more rights. And we believe that through a libertarian policy, through a capitalistic, free market-based libertarian approach to the market, that is the tide that brings up all ships, and that's the common denominator that has brought essentially the United States and Europe and the developed world into a state of prosperity over the past 1 or 200 years. And so when we look at, okay, how does libertarianism protect the individual? Oftentimes we talk about the free market, and essentially we want these things. People vote with their dollars, they vote with their participation in the labor market. Naturally, we desire better and better things, and I think when we look at social progress, a lot of it is driven by a desire to essentially have better and better things. And to what degree government has been involved, I think has really been preceded by the social movements. I don't think the government is actually the driver of a lot of these changes. I think a lot of our progress in when it comes to many areas. I mean, I'll take one example, which would be if you go to the grocery store, you'll notice there's probably a lot more organic labeled food, or there's a lot healthier food than there was when I was growing up. And that's a market-led approach to, hey, consumers want healthier food, so why don't we give it to them, because that's where the money is. And I think that industries over time have a way of sort of self-regulating. But as far as, we'll talk a bit about, I guess, child labor. Libertarians don't believe that children should be necessarily working in unsafe conditions. Children aren't adults. Children, I mean, I was working when I was young in my parents' businesses, and some of it was probably free labor, but it certainly taught me a lot. And, I was there, and I've been working since I was a teenager, 13, 14 years old. And so, again, protection of the rights of the individual is key. If you're working in an asbestos factory and you're being harmed, there should be essentially there needs to be liability. Libertarians are believers in liability. So it all depends on essentially we believe in strong tort laws. We believe in a strong judicial system that can make sure that the rights of the individual are upheld. And there's definitely, I believe that's the reason why government exists in the first place. So I mean, we are, before we were called libertarians, believe it or not, we were liberals. Libertarians were liberals. As a matter of fact, in Europe, the word libertarian meant socialist in the beginning of the 20th century. Even to today, actually, in many places. In the 20th century in the United States, libertarians or liberals found that the word liberal started to mean socialist in the United States. So we co-opted the term libertarian and made that our word. But many libertarians refer to themselves as classical liberals.
That's so interesting you say that, because people keep asking me what I am, and I keep saying I'm a classical liberal, 19th century European liberal, human rights, rule of law, individual, the individual above the collective. So really, when you say the individual above the collective, libertarianism is the ultimate antidote or opposition to communism, right?
Correct.
Thank God. No, seriously, because leftism didn't used to be actual communism in the United States, and it's becoming actual communism. So, the rise of American libertarianism is, not a moment too soon, because we now have true American communism, which I never thought I'd see the day. So let me ask you this. I came at my liberalism through feminism, or I came at my feminism through liberalism. And and yeah, and I always thought like democracy was the ultimate manifestation of feminism, for women, right? That the end result of women being fully enfranchised, having legal rights, being seen as individuals would be a fuller democracy, a fulfillment of democracy. So when feminism began to be, I'm going somewhere with this, trust me, but when feminism began to be kind of redefined more and more rigidly as, special privileges for women, or, women are better than men, or battle of the sexes, it just alienated me, and it made me feel like the individual is getting lost, right,
Hmm.
into this collective, and a collective identity. So where I'm going with this is I'm seeing that a lot of, obviously in the last election, a lot of you know, Hispanics in America and African Americans and quote unquote minorities of many kinds are really rejecting, understandably, this kind of very rigid DEI version of
Hmm.
racial consciousness, right? Which does not go back to Reverend Martin Luther King. It does not go back to even, Booker T. Washington. And, it doesn't go back to the really libertarian kind of philosophies of racial emancipation, going back to the Civil War all the way through to, the 1960s, the Civil Rights Act. So where I'm going with this is, do you think, and are you finding that a lot of new libertarians are people of color, however
Hmm.
inadequate that word is, who really don't like the anti freedom kind of box of contemporary racial discourse?
That's a really good question. As a matter of fact, I do.
Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf. Have you seen the news from economists forecasting a depression, not a recession, a depression by the year 2030? We are in a perfect storm as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point with the largest generation reaching retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base, and pair that with our growing national debt and rising cost of living, we have a huge problem. So what are you doing now to protect your family for the future? Gold is a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. So protect your future today. Text Daily Clout to 989898. Get your free info kit on gold and a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, only information. Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings. You can count on them too. Text Daily Clout to the number 989898 today.
I think 10 years ago when I joined the Libertarian Party, it was quite frankly, and this isn't a knock, it was a lot of very ivory tower, usually white professor intellectual types, which, whatever. But now I see a lot more diversity, not only in race, but also in gender and in age. So you're seeing a lot more women in the movement. You're seeing a lot of young people in the movement. You're seeing a lot of diversity in background, ethnicity, etc. So absolutely, I think libertarianism is catching on. And, personally, I think libertarianism promotes more of a meritocracy or a meritocratic system, because it's about the results. It's about getting, who are the people for the job that can do the job the best, point blank. It's not about having one group rise above another. And I live in here in South Florida, so a very, very diverse, population. And what I'm seeing is, and I think this is telling. Miami-Dade County actually voted majority
Mr.
red.
Usually, can you say that again? Because we
Oh,
just had some
yeah.
interruption in audio.
Okay, no problem. I was just saying, I live in South Florida, a very diverse population, and what's very fascinating is that while it's a city and it's very, typically very liberal, they actually voted majority red in the last election, which I thought was very interesting, and I think it's very indicative of. And I'll say this: the Hispanics that live and the Cubans that live in South Florida are very, very anti-communist, to say the least. So,
Understandable.
oh, understand, right? And it's extremely interesting because that tells me, and I've talked to a lot of people down here. There's no monolithic, well, because you're a minority, so to speak, in the United States, or because
Right.
you're this or that, then you should be voting lockstep with the Democrats, or you should be voting, to a left-leaning perspective, or what have you. And I think Javier Milei, the first libertarian head of state of Argentina, anywhere in the world necessarily, but of Argentina, he won his election against essentially 80 to 100 years of socialism, of communism in his country, because his people wanted something different, because they believed that the people in power and the government were parasites. They weren't people who actually had their country in mind. It was all about self-interest, and they believed that Javier Milei was really going to cut the fat from the state and give essentially the power and the wealth and the control back to the people. And so I think a lot of Americans are from all walks of life are saying, yeah, enough is enough.
Right.
And they're becoming more libertarian in the sense of, it's not about your ethnicity, it's not about your background. That stuff is important at a personal level, but when it comes to what's really important, it's our humanity, it's
Right.
our value that we contribute to society, to each other. It's about helping our fellow man. It's about making our society a better place, et cetera, et cetera. And I think definitely just by our own demographics, shifting to this sort of younger, more diverse vibe in the Libertarian Party, I think it's probably a good microcosm for the rest of the country and where we're going politically. So it is really interesting. And you mentioned earlier, libertarianism being the antidote to communism. It's important to remember that communism and libertarianism are both isms, or both ideologically driven.
Right.
So Communist Party USA, they're communist. Libertarianism, the Libertarian Party USA, we're libertarian, and we have this totally opposite, ideology. And it is very interesting. I think it is prime time for libertarianism to really take a footing.
Definitely. I mean, that's persuasive. Just before we move on from this particular topic about kind of new groups of people embracing libertarianism, I'm really interested to hear that young people are flocking to the movement, because I too, like you, thought it was like 60 plus, white academics for the most part. And the ones I've met have been either 60 plus white academics or wannabe 60 plus. But do you find as a result, I hope the answer is yes, that your group, your community of libertarians are more kind of pleasant and harmonious because people are taking each other as individuals? Does it actually lift some of the emotional rancor of all of the division that we have in this country by race and gender and social class and so on?
I think that we've always been a diverse group in the Libertarian Party, and it's always been an interesting coalition, because you have the classical liberals on one side, and then you've got sort of the more minarchists who believe in a very, very limited government, even as small as or smaller than the Constitution. Then you have your anarcho-capitalists who are more of your Rothbardians, or you're of the more anarchist thread who believe, well, all this is great, but we need to go to the next step, which is a society free of government, and everything should be privatized and based on a rule of law under a libertarian rubric, which is an interesting philosophy in itself. And I wouldn't knock it until you read into it, at least try to understand it. And so you have sort of this big tent libertarianism, and then people inside who believe, perhaps we should focus more on social issues, or more on fiscal issues, or whatever. And so to that degree of an ideological strain, there's always going to be some conflict. But I think, it's my job as chair, and I think, essentially the party's job is to say, okay, all that's great. Maybe there's some differences, but at the end of the day, the Libertarian Party as a whole, what we believe is so radical compared to mainstream politics as it is, that even if we move in, let's say, the most moderate direction, let's say getting out of foreign entanglements, and getting not involved into all these foreign wars, going back to the gold standard, ending the NSA spying apparatus, and all these things, shrinking the size and scope of government to the nth degree. These are all things we agree on that are already so so radical in the sense of we're changing, trying to move the Overton window more towards libertarian direction, that we can probably agree on things and move in the same direction. Say, okay, we're on a 100-mile journey. We're arguing over the last 3 exits to get off of. Let's just get most of the way there. We can figure out the rest, right?
Gotcha. But I mean, in your answer, Mr. Nekhaila, you kind of answered my question affirmatively, whether you meant to or not, because I was asking, are you less divided by race, class, gender? And you seem to be saying the divisions are ideas, like a bunch of individuals arguing about ideas. Well, that's the ideal society.
Hi, everyone. Naomi Wolf here. Ashish Kumar Jha, who was the former Biden administration COVID-19 response coordinator, recently gave a chilling speech at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. Jha warned of a new age of pandemics, fueled by bioweapons development and by natural threats. He called for massive investments in vaccines against pathogens that don't even exist yet, and urged a war against so-called, quote, misinformation. But the question we need to ask is, who's working on bioweapons, and how many labs are there globally? Yes, Trump won, but that doesn't mean that evil is not still lurking in the background, and being prepared, no matter what your politics, is always the best defense. The wellness company's Contagion Emergency Kit, developed by Dr. Peter McCullough and his medical board, includes 5 critical life-saving medications, such as ivermectin, Tamiflu, and a nebulizer. It includes hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to these hard-to-get medications without any of the red tape. It's so simple. Fill out a digital intake form and your kit will arrive in 1 to 2 weeks. Don't wait until the powers that be put their plans into action. Stay ready for the unexpected. History has shown that only that way can you really stay safe. Head to dailyclouthealth.com and use code DAILYCLOUT to save $32 off plus free shipping. Kits are only available to U.S. residents. I really urge you to go ahead and protect your family now. dailyclouthealth.com and use promo code DAILYCLOUT. Thank you.
All right. Well, we talked about meritocracy. What I'd love to know now is your view on the election. Do you think MAGA is fulfilling some of the Libertarian Party's wish list, or do you miss the other people? And what are your plans for upcoming elections? Are you guys going to become more and more involved as kind of kingmakers in the electoral process?
That's a great question. I would say, the results of the last election were very interesting, and I have a few thoughts on that. I think that Donald Trump 2024 is a very different Donald Trump from 2016. The people he's surrounding himself with, the sort of vigor that he's displayed on the campaign trail. And I think one thing that's very important to remember about Donald Trump is he is a populist, which essentially means that, he really, I think, tried to connect with the people on a very fundamental level, and is really based his campaign around the average person, which I think was quite interesting. But what does that mean for actual policy, and especially in a libertarian sense? I think we're going to see some things from Trump that we like. I think we're going to see some things that we hate. It's only been, I think today was actually his first 30 days. So, there's, from a libertarian perspective, there's Trump is certainly no libertarian. And what he does is really based on, the flavor of the week, or what his advisors have been telling him. And so there's a certain level of unpredictability with Trump, which is certainly quite interesting. I'll give you some examples of things that I think do align with the libertarians' view. I think DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, has been quite interesting. They've audited U.S. aid and found a bunch of fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's only a very small portion of the federal budget. And people need to remember that U.S. aid and a lot of these organizations and agencies that are being audited, these are agencies that have existed under both Republican and Democratic regimes. So it's not to say, well, it's this side or that side that started this. It's under the purview of both sides of government and Congress, that have allowed for this to occur.
Good point.
And so, the amount of waste at the federal level is staggering. And I would put something on X, and I said, at Doge or whatever, that the biggest, if they really are serious about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, they should be auditing the Pentagon, because the Pentagon has trillions of dollars of black budget programs. They failed almost every audit they've been given over the past at least decade or more, probably 2 decades, at least going back to 2000. I know they've had trillions of dollars missing. And, what's so crazy about the Pentagon is I actually know the local Navy Public Works head. He just retired. And the local families that live on base, the homes are dilapidated, they're moldy, they're falling apart, they're spalling. And yet the government has billions of dollars to send overseas to other countries for their defense. So where is this money going? Because it's not that the government doesn't have the money, but wherever it's being allocated is going to all the wrong places.
Yeah, totally.
Hundreds of dollars for screws and bolts going to Afghanistan. I mean, there's so much waste to uncover that I think that at least Doge is a good start. I hope they certainly continue. And there's been a slew of executive orders and things like that. Some align, some don't with libertarian policy. Trump wants to end the income tax, allegedly, which is a good step, but he also wants to levy heavy tariffs, which is not very libertarian.
Interesting. Right.
And so, and the reason for that is because, what we buy, most of the things we buy come from a globalized system. A lot of it comes from overseas. The idea is try to make American products more competitive, but by doing so, it'll be inherently inflationary, and it doesn't fix the problem of prices and manufacturing. And
right.
So
wow.
So there's a lot of things some things we agree on, some things we don't.
Do you agree with the Trump administration more than you all agreed with the Biden administration or the DNC right now, or is it that a curse on both their houses, basically?
It's an interesting question, because the DNC, I would say under the Biden regime, it was always good fundraising for the Libertarian Party, and because we're so diametrically opposed to a lot of what they were putting forward, perhaps there was a few things that Biden did that perhaps we sort of agreed on. Ending the war in Afghanistan, perhaps was one. The way that the withdrawal happened, I think, was a disaster because of all the weapons and everything that were left behind. And that was really a pivotal moment too, just reflecting on the war on terror over the past 2 decades, essentially, and how it really ended up being such a failure in U.S. foreign policy, pretty much with the same result as what was started. The United States went in to take power away from the Taliban, to leave in charge of the Taliban. So, it just all goes back, no matter who's in charge, and both parties have had their hand in things. We can thread the needle and say, at the end of the day, it is big government policies that cause all these problems. And while they try to blame each other, libertarians have always blamed the uniparty, and essentially both having a role to play in most of this. Right. And so, there are some libertarians that, or rank and file members or people, perhaps in the MAGA movement that may lean libertarian, that are supporting Trump or what have you. And to that, I would say, again, there's probably going to be some things that Trump does that are good. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, we're aligned with that specific issue or coalition, or we believe we should be doing more in that direction. because we don't want to just be contrarians that say, well, no matter what anybody does, it's all terrible, because that's not a good message either. But certainly there's some things that we are vehemently against that are a far cry from libertarian policy. And that's why our voice is so important, to try to move the needle in that direction.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I just, full disclosure, I love many of the Doge headlines, but I'm very, very worried, and this is a libertarian issue, arguably, about the conditions under which that data is being accessed, because I'm worried from a cybersecurity perspective, because depending on how the data is being accessed, there could be a whole cloud of everybody's everything that isn't kept safe by the U.S. government, much as we may hate the U.S. government, is in the hands of private individuals, and a control grid, literally a Chinese social credit system could be constructed overnight. But that's
what you said is so interesting, because it just, I think it makes I think that goes back to the point that the government should never have had all that power in the first place.
Right.
Because if they have the power, the data, and everything for essentially as a turnkey tyranny, you get the wrong people in charge. And eventually, with the right structure, there's everything that a despot would need to, say, well, tomorrow our true enemy is XYZ, and, we need to deal with that threat. And government, turns tyrannical pretty quick. If the 20th century has taught us anything. So from a libertarian point of view, no matter who's in charge, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whomever, our message has always been consistent. It's, if you don't trust the other side with that power, you shouldn't trust yourself with that power either, because you're not.
Why do you understand that and no one else seems to understand that? I literally posted that on X like 2 days ago. Not exactly that, but like, imagine if the other side had this power. Like every step anyone takes, imagine if the other side had it. People are so weirdly tribal in this binary system. So libertarians, it sounds like, transcend that. Well, so are you going to, where does it go from here, right? You're chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. I assume that's the biggest thing you can be as a libertarian, right? You're the top libertarian, right?
Right. At least in internal politics.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you going to run for office? Are you guys going to start fielding candidates? Are you fielding candidates already and I'm just not aware of it? Is there a grassroots effort to get libertarian policies, bills? We can help with that, by the way. We draft bills, into people's hands. Like, what's the strategy beyond theory? You have to stay healthy and well at times like this. That I often have suffered from mobility issues, and now I don't. Part of my lifestyle is Native Path collagen. So Native Path's collagen formula is made with ingredients that are scientifically developed to increase bone mineral density, support tissue recovery, reduce wrinkles, enhance hair thickness, and strengthen nails. Who wouldn't want more collagen with all of these benefits? So right now, when you visit getnativepath.com/daily clout, you can stock up on Native Path collagen for up to an incredible 45% off today, plus free shipping. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee. You can try it risk-free today. It is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners, and it's third-party tested for heavy metals, which makes sure that it is pure and safe. It's flavorless. You can add it to anything. I add it to my oatmeal. You can add it to coffee or smoothies. Its formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes without clumping. And the best part is Native Path is offering amazing bundle deals, 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. And they offer an 800 number. You can ask any question. A real person is waiting to help. You can join a private Facebook community. I love these people. Share recipes, success stories. So that's getnativepath.com/daily clout and start your experience of transformation today.
So putting it into practice, and this has been kind of my messaging since I've been chair, is, look, to my grassroots libertarians, we can't be afraid of the word power. And what I mean by that is, we have such a disdain for power and people who like to seek power and the whole government system that, ironically enough, many libertarians just say, well, through our good ideas alone, we're going to use logic and convince the government and the state to back down. But that'll never be the case. There needs to be a reason for government to back down and for libertarian ideas to take the main stage. And that's going to happen through essentially gaining footholds as libertarians in positions of power. So what does that look like in practice? The Libertarian National Committee adopted a strategy back in Miami in August of last year called Project Decentralized Revolution. And essentially that project is a strategy to get local libertarians elected all around the country and build footholds of power, regionally, in different communities, to get candidates, campaigns going in winnable races. Wow. And the idea is that, the likelihood of throwing, money and at a gubernatorial race, whether it's governor or president or whatever, those are search and rescue missions. Those are to get the ideas out there. Those are to get, ballot access, things like that. But the real big difference happens at the local level. And I would make an argument that getting a libertarian city hall is going to have more profound impact on your life than having a libertarian president. I mean, don't get me wrong, both would be great, but one is a lot more likely. So, if we were to get libertarians in positions of local power, then there's a proof of concept there. Okay, well, what are the policies being put forward? Did they lower taxes? Did they protect civil liberties? Did having a libertarian sheriff, create, X, Y, and Z? So putting people into positions of authority, helping them draft legislation, work together as a network of libertarians nationwide, and showing proof of concept. Well, this is the work product. Do you want to see more of this? And, get people to essentially donate towards having libertarians elected at the local level. And dollar for dollar, that's the best bang for our buck.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
And as a matter of fact, when we look at the data and you look at libertarians who have, voter data, they have the tools, they have the support, they win about 50% of the time in municipal elections.
Oh, that's
really good odds.
Very
good odds.
Well, plus, I always agree that local is easier and more impactful than aiming at the federal. That's just clear. Like we've seen so often with bills that it doesn't take that much to pass a bill at a state house level. It doesn't take that much mobilization, but at a federal level, very difficult. So I'm sure you're right about your strategy, but I was also going to say, in addition, 4+%, if people really vote, you really can swing, future elections. So you can be impactful, the more you raise your visibility and turn out your voters on a federal level as well. You can determine future elections with a margin like that, or help to do so. So that's going to really make a difference. And are you going to run for office yourself, Mr. Nekhaila?
I did run for Key West City Commissioner. It was a great experience. I actually made a lot of friends. So one of my opponents, I ended up endorsing her after the primary, and she ended up winning. And so we've got a really good relationship. I do hope to continue to run for office locally. And basically since that point, I've been very involved in local community. I'm on the board of directors for the local Chamber of Commerce. I'm involved in, some of the sports and stuff like that down here, sponsoring and whatnot, and just getting to know people. So I think one of the best things that taught me, one of the best things libertarians can do is get involved in their own communities and actually relationship build. Because it's not enough to just, running for office is a great first step. But before that or after that, getting involved, getting to know people, even people who are across the aisle, and seeing where we can have coalitions and have agreements and work together on is so key to a libertarian local strategy. Right. That, going to city council meetings, meeting the right people, getting involved in civic organizations, those are the things that really spread libertarianism, because you will find a lot of people probably agree with us. They might be full-fledged libertarians and not even know about it. So the best recruitment effort really is being an ambassador for the ideology, being an ambassador for the party, And in many cases, we might be the first libertarians they meet. So,
Right.
having that connection, putting a face to the idea, I think is so important. And you mentioned, earlier too, getting that, few percent national elections. And I do think that is important. I do think that is important because there's a reason why the old two parties keep trying to court libertarians, is because we do make up a voting bloc. And in many states, especially during the Gary Johnson election, which was the last 10 years our most successful, we beat the spread in many states. So the difference between Republican or Democrat winning, we actually were a wider spread percentage of votes. So they're looking at, well, how do we cut into that percentage?
Right.
And I've always been of the mind of, voting for somebody who doesn't represent you is wasting your vote.
Totally.
So,
right. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a multi-pronged strategy, and we hope to get out there more in the media and everything else, and spread the ideology culturally and politically, and that's my aim as chair over the next year and a half in this term.
Well, that's really exciting. Sadly, our time has come to an end, but I'm so grateful to you for your generosity with your time and your ideas. It's really exciting. I know a lot of our audience will just feel like there's a home they can go to as they, listen to you. And I know they'll want to find out more. As you know, Daily Cloud is at your disposal, because this is exactly our mission, to bring, ideas like yours, options like yours, to help people engage with democracy. And so we're there for any position papers, any launches, any bills, any additional interviews you want to have, or your members want to have. And then where do people find you apart from that?
So you can find me on X, Stephen Nekhaila, and I would encourage anybody who's interested to head over to lp.org and sign up for our newsletter, donate. If you want to become a member, you don't have to switch your party registration. You could stay, whatever party you are. You can still vote in your primaries. Or, of course, if you're all in, I certainly encourage you to switch to Libertarian and hang out and, go to your local chapter meeting. See if there's a local Libertarian chapter near you. And if you want to see a big change, consider running for office or helping somebody run for office and be the change you wish to see in your own community. So lp.org, you can find me on X, like I said, Stephen Nekhaila, and Naomi, I really appreciate you having me on. I really, really enjoyed it.
We do too. Thanks so much, and best of luck taking back our libertarian values in our country. Thank you, Mr. Nekhaila. Thank you. See you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.